So, is it possible for two people to fall in love and stay in love forever? It's the question that you see all over social media and all over podcasts because the current generation and the one coming up behind is still clinging to the idea that it's possible. But as they look around at marriages and the relationships around them, few and fewer are believing it's probable. We've said that falling in love is actually easy. In fact, in leading up this morning, I actually decided to try and think back to remember the first time that I felt the first stages of falling in love. And for me, it was the fourth grade. Unlike some boys growing up, I never went through a stage where I didn't like girls or thought they had cooties or gross. Like I just never ever went through that. Somewhere deep down, as far back as I could remember, I just kind of thought girls were fascinating. And in the fourth grade, living in Germantown, Wisconsin, I fell in love with my teacher, Miss Miller. She was so pretty. She was fun. She always had a smile for me. She was always so encouraging and patient and kind, even though I found it nearly impossible to not get in trouble at least 10 or 15 times a day. But she always inspired me to do better. And I just determined in the first part of my fourth grade year that I was going to grow up and marry her. And then my dad moved us to Wichita and derailed all my well laid plans. But for nearly all of us, there is a point in where we begin to experience this desire, and it can be a deep primal desire for the kind of intimacy that requires that one-on-one soulmate, that special person, that fall in love best friend. And the dream is that it will be a love that lasts until we breathe our last. And I think that's the reflection of God in your soul and in mine. And even though there are some who are part of this community who are here, or those who listen online, again, we have several that listen online who are single or will or plan to remain single. All of us have married people in our lives as well, and as those who will get married in the future. So part of this series, maybe the value for you is it provides some talking points or to message or text or email them this content and to have conversations or to begin to help them. Because among other things, we've learned that if you're going to fall in love and you're going to stay in love forever, the first thing that we have to do is we have to recognize love as a verb. We have to recategorize it because, especially in American culture, we treat love like a noun. We've had a bit of English 101 the last few weeks. That noun love is I'm experiencing an intense feeling of deep affection. This is primarily the way we use and define love, which is why we can so easily fall in love and fall out of love. But we've learned if you're going to fall in love and stay in love forever, we have to stop using love as a noun and make it a verb. And we've been, again, doing some English 101. You fall into love, but verb love is what you must do from that point on. And our standard has been Jesus and the love that he modeled and the way he verb loved us and modeled for us how we are to love each other. And then last week we said you got to pay attention to your heart. I introduced you to Mr. and Mrs. Mugg. They were full of beads. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to catch that message online. My OCD couldn't handle having beads all over the place again. But we discovered last week that all of us have junk in us. And then when we get bumped, it comes out. That we generally get bumped the hardest in a romantic relationship. And then when this junk comes out that we don't like, whether it's anger or frustration or bitterness or jealousy or whatever it is, our natural response is to blame the person that we're in a relationship with. But the reason it came out of us is because it was already in us to begin with. And our ability to fall in love and stay in love has as much to do with the condition of our heart and what we brought into the relationship as it does with the behavior of our spouse. Even though we don't like to admit that, we have to own that. And I'm not going to recap everything we've covered so far, so please, while you're driving or mowing or working out or walking or chilling at home, just make it a priority to listen to any of these that you missed because they build on one another. You have no idea the difference it could make in your life or the life of someone you care about that you may think, oh, I need to share this with them. Because today I'm going to talk about a decision that everybody who's in love makes on a constant daily basis. And I can't emphasize this enough, that the way that you respond to what I'm going to talk about today will play a huge role as to whether or not you're going to be able to stay in love or fall in love again and stay in love. And if you're a parent, the role it will play for your children. If you're a grandparent, the role it will play for your grandchildren. My grandparents had a huge impact on how I viewed marriage and relationship and forgiveness, because your children and grandchildren, they are watching and they are learning, observing far more what you do and how you treat each other and interact than what you tell them to do. And if you've been married for a while or you've been in a long-term relationship, the thing is, this is something you did intuitively when you were initially falling and then fell in love. But for most of us, we fall out of this habit. So consequently, we begin to undermine our own love relationships. So to get us where we're headed, this is a passage of scripture that nearly everyone in this room or listening has heard before at one point in time. It's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 Corinthians is a letter the Apostle Paul wrote to a church in the Greek city of Corinth. This is actually a city in southern Greece. And you likely have heard part of this chapter. Maybe it was read at a wedding. Maybe it was read at your own wedding. And the thing is, that most of 1 Corinthians chapter 13 makes sense. You read it and you go, oh yeah, I need to work at that, or I'm pretty good at that, or I'm not so good at that. A good reminder, thank you. But there's one verse in this chapter that at first glance, if you pay attention, it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't make any sense at best. It seems like horrible advice at worst. But in this verse, the Apostle Paul is trying to say one very powerful thing, and it's something that people who are in love do all of the time. And we're going to talk about that. So I'll read you a few verses leading up to verse 7, and then we're going to camp out on verse 7. Here's what he says in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4. He says, love is patient. Okay, got that. Love is kind. Okay, that makes sense. It does not envy. It does not boast. It's not proud. Okay, don't be an arrogant husband. Don't be an arrogant wife. It does not dishonor others. Okay, good idea. If I'm in a relationship, I don't want to dishonor the other person. It's not self-seeking, because self-seeking works against love. Okay, gotcha. It's not easily angered. Okay, some of us have some anger issues. Okay, got to work on it. It keeps no record of wrongs. Now, don't raise your hand, no elbows, no head turns with raised eyebrows. Some of you, it's like you have the spiritual gift of this, okay? Like, you're good at this. Like some of you, if you're not married, your mom or your dad, or maybe you are married, but your mom or your dad was maybe very good at this. Usually your mom, your parents would get into an argument, and then your mom would open up that mental file drawer, and she'd scroll back to April 13th, 1995, and she could remember the things that your dad did wrong, and then your dad would sit down and will say, yeah, it began around 3 in the afternoon, and, just like, wow, okay, keep no record of wrongs. Probably need to work on that. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth. That is, you celebrate the wins and you don't camp out on the negatives. Okay, makes sense, Paul. Thank you. I need to work at that. This is a good list. But then he gets to verse 7. And in verse 7, he takes this little Greek word and he uses it 4 times. And he matches it up with 4 different Greek words or phrases. He rapidly says 4 different things that go together to make one specific point. But if you pull any of these out by themselves, they don't really make sense. Again, for our purposes, Paul is getting at one of the most important habits and practices for an in love, especially romantic love relationship. Here's how he says it, verse 7. Love, it always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And for many of us, we've heard this passage maybe so many times that we don't really stop to consider the implications, because if we are to take this literally, it kind of makes love blind at best and maybe in denial at worst. I mean, believes all things? Well, what if there's evidence to the contrary? I'm just supposed to be in a relationship and say, oh yeah, well, whatever the situation, I'm just to believe all things. Like, isn't that what codependent people do? Isn't that what an unhealthy people do? I mean, is it kind of unhealthy? Isn't that pretty much what you hear from women who refuse to get out of an abusive relationship? And again, if you separate these out from one another, they don't really make sense. But by putting them all together, what Paul is communicating an invaluable principle. So what I want to do is, for the next few minutes, just explain what the Apostle Paul is getting at, and then we're going to come back to this verse and look at it through a new filter that I want to create for you. So let me illustrate it this way: that in every relationship, ultimately, there's going to be a gap between what we expect in our relationship and the behavior. So right here, there's a gap between what we expect and a behavior. The gap is that I expected you to do this, but instead you did this. You said you'd be here at 4, but instead you got here at 4:30. You said you'd call, but you didn't call. You said you were never going to do that again, but you're doing it again. And again, this can be it can be deep, it can be shallow, it can be general, it can be explicit, but in every romantic relationship, at some point, there's going to be a gap between what we expect and the behavior, what happens. And it can be something that maybe it was something that we said when we were dating. Here's what it's going to be like, and we expected it, and it didn't happen. It could be something that was said in during the engagement or in your wedding vows. You vowed this, but this didn't happen. It could be for a lot of people, it's what the situation, the home that you grew up in. Well, this is what a husband or this is what a dad does, and you're not doing it. This is what a wife says or does or how they act, and you're not doing it. And there is a gap. It's a gap between what we expect and their behavior. And every single time, we choose what we put in the gap. So we've got a gap. We've got to decide what we're going to put in it. And what we decide is whether or not we are going to believe the best or assume the worst. That's what we put in the gap every single time. We choose to believe the best or assume the worst. And if you're married, you immediately know what your spouse does. If you're not sure about you, ask them when you leave the day. They know. And we know we either do this, we either believe the best or we assume the worst. And so let me talk about this just for a second. As we talk about this gap in a relationship, as soon as you realize there's a gap, I expected you to do this, but instead you did this. As soon as you realize that, we immediately in our minds we go somewhere. We believe the best or we assume the worst. We believe the best or we go, well, he's been really busy. He's just got so much going on. There's been so many demands. Life has been crazy. That's believing the best. I'm sure this is why he's late. Believe the best. Assume the worst. You know what? He doesn't pay attention to his watch. He doesn't pay attention to his clock. He probably doesn't care that he's late again and how this affects me. He doesn't pay attention. All of it begins right here in our mind. When it comes to money, well, it looks like she's off budget again. We'll believe the best. Well, she probably just didn't know. Life's been busy. Life's been crazy. Like she just missed it. Assume the worst. She's never been good with money. Her mama wasn't good with money. Her grandmama wasn't good with money, but she's never going to be good with money. And wherever it is on either side, we start to build up an attitude. Now, there are two things that determine what you're going to put in the gap. The first is what you see, and the second is who you are. So what you see is, he's running late again. This is what I see. And then who you are. This is the harder part. This is what we began to touch on last week. See, we all come into our love relationship with some internal beads, some internal junk, and we underestimate this. We come in with junk and hang-ups and some wounds, some past trauma. Even if your mom and dad, they did a lot of things great, there were things that they didn't do so great. And there's what they did and didn't do in their relationship, or what you experienced maybe in past relationships leading up to this one. And in every case, this has affected your heart. And in some cases, it's infected your heart. And you know this if you've been married very long, that it doesn't take long for your spouses or the person that you love the most for their behavior to trigger something in you. In fact, there's a lot of times with couples as I'm preparing them for marriage, one of the things I say, and they don't believe me, I say to them, some of the things that are attracting you to one another now are going to irritate the snot out of you down the road. Okay, just like no, that's not going to happen. Okay, so but ultimately, it's who you are that plays a huge role of what you put into the gap. So, yes, part of it is connected to your spouse's behavior, but the other part of what drives what you put in the gap is who you are. Again, what you've experienced, your hurt, your pain, your joys, what you saw growing up, your fear of being abandoned, your fear of being on your own, whatever it might be. We all bring this with us, and it all impacts what we put in the gap in between expectations and their behaviors. So let me just ask the question, don't answer it out loud. Which way do you tend to go in your mind? As soon as you get the text, he's going to be late again. Hey, as soon as you get the text, hey, could you pick up the kids instead? As soon as you get the text, hey, I was going to fix dinner, but so-and-so called and threw off my day. Could you just pick something up on your way home? Where do you go? And some of you might think, okay, hold on, Chad. Let me tell you about my spouse real quick and their patterns and the history. You'd put away these stupid signs, and we would have a real sermon and get us like, you need to hear my sad story. Listen, I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've heard all the sad stories. In fact, I'm sure I could tell you sad stories that could trump your sad story. And I'm not making light of it. And I'm not being insensitive. And I'm not naive. I understand the real world. I live in it. And I understand that there is a small category of exceptions. I have people in my life who have been in physically abusive relationships. I have more than one person in my life whose spouse unexpectedly developed mental illness like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. I understand there are outliers. But for the vast majority of us, this isn't the issue. For the vast majority of us, it's just dealing with the natural challenges and junk that is part of living as flawed individuals who married flawed individuals and who are living in this broken world. And it's learning to live under a new set of standards and guides and laws of living as part of what we talked about in our last series, in a new, different set of laws to live by as part of the kingdom of Jesus, the kingdom of heaven that Jesus came to introduce into this world. So I am not saying where you go first in your mind isn't justified. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just asking, where do you immediately and naturally mentally go when there's a gap between the expectation and the behavior? Where does your spouse naturally go? Because you need to understand this. People who stay in love, they believe the best. Naturally, intuitively, or just by force of habit, they naturally go there. And they learn to consistently, regardless of circumstances, choose to believe the best. When you find people who are still crazy in love, you will not find couples where there is no gap. There's always a gap. The difference is what they choose to put in the gap, in between. Which means, as we're going to see in a minute, for those that believe the best, they are generous in their explanation, in their mind, with when they decide what they're going to put in the gap, and there's an explanation as to why. They're generous with their explanation. Years ago, it's a really cool study. There's a group of researchers, they wanted to study successful relationships. So they got a group of people together who were considered very, very happy in their relationship. They've been married for at least 10 years. And they decided to ask this question: what is the common denominator? What is the one thing? And they assumed, based on previous research, that they already knew the answer, because in previous research they had studied a lot of unhealthy couples and couples whose relationships eventually fell apart. And what they discovered was in the unhealthy relationships that didn't make it and fell apart, there was just a huge misunderstanding between the two parties as to what the other was like. There was just a complete disconnect. They just didn't understand why she was this way and why he was this way. And I didn't know when we got married. And so they assumed when they studied these happy couples, they would find a husband and wife, a pair that they just truly and deeply understood each other. They were realistic about each other. Well, he or she's, they're just not that good at it. That's not their strength. That's one of their weaknesses. But I just don't expect that much. They expected to find very realistic expectations based on the realities of these people, but what they discovered was the very opposite. When they tested these couples who had been married for 10 years or longer, who were considered happy and in love, what they discovered was that they, in fact, had very unrealistic views of one another, positively. For example, they would give the man a test to have him rate himself in all these different categories. And then they would give his partner the same test and have her rate him. And you know what happened? The wife would rate her husband higher in every single category than he rated himself, and vice versa. In every case, they consistently rated one another higher over and over and over again in every single category. And their conclusion from the test was love really is a bit blind. That these happy couples did not have a realistic view of their partner. So here are some of the findings. I just want to read a few statements. This is so interesting. They use the word illusion. The spouse's positive illusion created an upward spiral of love. And if you think that's weird, this is exactly what you did when you fell in love, I guarantee you. If you're someone who has fallen in love, especially for those of you who've gotten married, ended up getting married, when you fell in love, you did in fact think he was the greatest person on the planet. You saw no fault in her, and you treated her that way, which then fueled her treating you that way in an upward spiral of love, and vice versa. In fact, there may have been people in your life who said, he's kind of like, yeah, I know, but, and you would point out all these good things. Or, I don't know if she's like, yeah, but, and you'd point out all the good things. Your love was blind. So here was the researchers' findings. A spouse's positive illusion created an upward spiral of love. The illusion creates conviction. They really are this way. The conviction leads to security. I can trust myself with this person because look how they are. The security fosters intimacy. Intimacy fosters love. So a husband who assumes his wife possesses strengths that she doesn't think she possesses, but then he treats her as if she does, will have a strong marriage. A marriage where you assume that your husband possesses strengths that he doesn't think he has them, but you treat him as if he does, that will be a healthy marriage, a strong relationship, evidence of it. So here's their advice from this study. So again, here's the mental part, like where you go. When there's a gap, they would say, fine, be creative, think until you come up with the most generous explanation for each other's behavior, and then believe it. So here's just a couple examples they gave. She's not impatient, she's just intense. He's not insensitive, he's just focused. Instead of, they didn't text me back because they don't care, I choose to believe they must be incredibly overwhelmed at work right now. Or maybe they don't have their phone with them. Instead of my spouse is being lazy by leaving a mess, you choose to believe, you know what? They're probably exhausted. I can show them love by taking care of this. At some point in a relationship, this is what they're saying, there's going to be a gap. But here's the thing. And you may not like this, but no matter what your experience has been in your past, whether it's with the person you're with now or somebody previously, every single time you choose what you put in the gap. Stay. Every single time you choose, you make a decision and it begins in your mind. And the researchers say happily married couples that stay happily married, it's because they learn to discipline themselves to choose to be generous in their explanation every time. So again, I'll just ask, where do you go with this naturally? Do you quickly go negative, or do you assume the best? It's your decision. And I know you've got a story. I'm not discounting that. You know how I know you have a story? I have a story. I have so many stories about my wife, and my wife has stories about me. And both of us, we could tell our stories to use and justify going negative. But we made a decision long ago. And because, especially for my wife, of her rule follower, more black and white temperament, I know that this is more challenging for her, which makes her more amazing. Because I know it doesn't come natural for her. And so when she does go positive, it makes me love her that much more. So I'm just asking, where do you go with this? And with that in mind, listen again to 1 Corinthians 13:7. This is so extraordinarily powerful. It's over 2,000 years old, and yet this could be the key for some of you who have started to grow apart or have grown apart. You may be against divorce, so you're at the point we're just going to gut it out, but it ain't fun. Maybe you hate it when the phone rings or dings because it's her. Maybe these days you don't like it when you hear the garage door open because it's him, or it's become a cycle of negativity. And for some, if we're not careful, it can get to the point where honestly, we kind of like it when our spouse screws up because it gives us another excuse to be right. Like I told you he wouldn't come through. I told you she couldn't stick it out. And then we just get in this cycle where you start looking or celebrating and you may win arguments but you make points, but you're losing the most important relationship in your life. It's our choice every single time what we put in the gap. So again, listen to 1 Corinthians 13:7. Again, it always protects. Well, what does it protect? Love protects the integrity of the relationship. I'm trying to protect the relationship. So I'm not going to look for an opportunity to put something in the negative column. I'm always looking for something to put in the positive column. I'm looking for a way to keep love alive. Always trust means it always looks for a generous explanation. Always hopes. That is, I hope there's a good generation, a good explanation. Hopefully there's just something I don't know. Hopefully he or she didn't mean what I thought they meant. I'm not going to give up hope until proven otherwise. Always perseveres. Always looks for the good. So how do you do on this? Where do you go naturally? Have you and your spouse gotten into a cycle? And again, maybe he's good at this. You're not so good at this. Maybe he cuts you slack all the time, but you think, well, of course he does. I'm next to perfect. But every once in a while you may miss the mark. Oh, well, nobody's perfect. But if he messes up, he's late 5 minutes, there's one unaccounted dollars, or he has to change his mind or change the plan, something, just like, well, there you go, of course, missed the mark, and you go negative. Or maybe she's great at this, and you're not. You're the one that goes negative. So where do you go with this? And just here's what I want us to hear. When you choose to assume the worst, even if there is plenty of history to back it up, every time you choose to go negative, you've chosen to contribute to the demise of your relationship. You are a participant. Again, I did enough work, especially early on with married couples, so I get it. People are, whoa, 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 I have a story. I know you got a story. We've all got a story. I just want us to hear this one part before we get to our stories, that every time, even when it seems justified, even when there's a history, every time you go negative mentally, that gets expressed in your attitude, your tone, your response, your text, whatever. And every time you assume the worst and go negative, you contribute to the demise of your love relationship, even when it's justified. Because let me tell you something, for those of you who are married, tell you something about the person you love or your spouse. The last thing they want to do is disappoint you. I don't care how bad the relationship is. I don't care what the history is. The last thing they want to do is for you to feel disappointed in their behavior, their response, their performance. I don't care who you are. Nobody wants to disappoint the person they're in a relationship with. So let me tell you what happens when one or the other goes negative. What it communicates is no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, you will never measure up. You will never hit the standard. You'll never be what I expect you to be. Every time you overtly, covertly, or subtly communicate that in the relationship, you push that person further away. It's, come on, perform. See, in your mind, you push them further away because they feel like a disappointment. And in your mind, you're going, look, okay, if you want to quit disappointing me, well, all you got to do is quit doing these two things, get these two things together, make up for the times that you got it wrong in the past, and then I'll be fine. Come on, perform, jump higher, be more careful, get here earlier, do this, do that, do more. Come, boy. Come on, girl. That's not how you decrease disappointment in a relationship. One of the most powerful things you could do is when there is a gap, is to communicate that you haven't disappointed me. Is to fill the gap with believe the best, because when you choose to believe the best, what you communicate to them is that even when there's a pattern of them not being the person you thought they should be or think they should be, here's what happens. It creates margin in the relationship. And a healthy person will respond to that margin and begin to move in your direction because it creates a sense of security. And security fosters intimacy, and intimacy fosters love. If you have consistently gone negative, they're afraid of you. They dread your text and the response. When he's running late or she's running late and they have a good reason, they're scared to death of how you're going to respond. So they put off sending the text or sending the message or making a call because they don't want to disappoint you. And when something prevents them from fulfilling an expectation, even a promised or agreed upon expectation, no matter what the reason, they know you're going to go negative. They don't want to be a disappointment. They don't want to be made to feel like they can't ever measure up. Nobody wants to feel that. That's why when you do this by choice and believe the best, when there's a gap, what you communicate is, I trust you. I trust you. Even before I hear your explanation, I trust you. Even before I hear the circumstances, I trust you. Trust in a relationship means I accept you. Acceptance means you've not disappointed in me. I may be disappointed about how it didn't work out, but I'm disappointed in you. Here's how it sounds in real life. Honey, I am running late. It's okay. Take your time. I'll be here. I'm here waiting for you. It's okay. For some of you, if your husband or wife responded that way, you would freak out. Like, what have you done with my husband? What have you done with my wife? Honey, I forgot to pay this bill. Instead of, aha, I knew you were going to forget. Told you to write it down. That you should. I've been waiting for you to forget to pay it, so I get to be right. No, instead, hey, it's okay. You've been busy. We've been busy. Life's been crazy. It's fine. You know what that is? That's saying, hey, come my way. Move my way. I mean, there's a gap. There's a reason for that gap. But instead of me using that gap to somehow punish you and push you further away and create distance, I'm going to use this gap to leverage love, to bring you closer to me, because I know you would never intentionally hurt or disappoint me. I trust you. And the more gaps there are, the more opportunities there are to say, I love you. I gave my wife so many opportunities to love me. It's to say, I love you anyway. I'm not giving up. I endure all things, bear all things, hope all things. I believe all things. You come my way. Now, let me be clear. I am not saying you don't have difficult conversations. In a romantic relationship, a long-term marriage, there's got to be difficult conversations. I'm not suggesting you don't confront the realities of a relationship and certain patterns that do need to change. But after those conversations, when everybody's had their say and worked it out, even in the process when you're mad, the next time there's a gap, you still have a choice to make. Am I going to keep a record of wrongs, or I'm going to believe the best? Am I going to assume the worst, or I'm going to believe the best? Because let me tell you about your spouse's heart. Relationships that last and thrive, they're relationships that choose to believe the best. Because again, let me tell you about your partner's, your spouse's heart. Your partner's heart is like your heart. Our hearts are drawn towards environments of acceptance. God made us this way. This is an opportunity to draw your partner's heart in your direction, just like you did when you first met. Otherwise, he or she may come home, but if it's an environment of you don't measure up, you're never going to measure up, their heart does not come home with them, no matter how hard they want it to. No bad that how bad they want it to. Because if I know I'm going to be raked over the coals because I forgot this or I forgot that or I forgot to pick up whatever, and what's communicated is you disappointed me again, you didn't measure up again, you didn't get it right again, try harder next time. I may be there in body, but my heart's not going to be with me. Couples that stay together forever and stay in love have learned there are going to be gaps. But the question is, what am I going to put in that gap? Believe the best or assume the worst. And the only question is, what am I going to put in that gap? Am I willing to put in that gap? I trust you until there's absolutely no way for other way. For me to not trust you. I'm not going to reject you, and I'm not going to criticize you and chastise you unless it's just absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's no excuse. And then we're going to have a tough conversation. But when that conversation is over, I'm going to choose to put in that gap, believe the best. How do you do that? Well, here's how Jesus summed this whole thing up. He said, do to others as you would have them do to you. Most of us learn this way. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, what if you decided to do for him or do for her the way what you would want done for you when you create the gap? When you fall short, you don't deliver, you don't meet an expectation. What if you treated them the way you would want to be treated? To choose that I'm going to do for him or her what I would want him or her to do for me. And again, for some of you, this could be revolutionary. As soon as you get that text or that phone call, as soon as you get home and the trash can is still out on the street, or you look through the mail and he promised, but he didn't, it just begins right here. And you have a choice to make. Some of you have to make this choice on the way home today because of how your spouse drives. Some of you are going to have to make this choice tomorrow morning, but it's your choice. Am I going to come up with a generous explanation and believe the best, or am I going to assume the worst? Happy couples have learned to fill the gap with believe the best every single time. And you know why this is so important? I mean, yes, for the purpose of us having happy, lasting relationships. But the other reason, one of the other reasons this is so important is we have a generation of young people and kids coming up behind us. And they may have never seen a great relationship, so that means they don't know what to shoot for someday when they're an adult. We have the opportunity to model this kind of brand new relationship, regardless of what home you came from or what was modeled for you in your past. And there's also something else that makes this so important, and that is that I don't know that there's anything else that speaks louder to culture about Christianity than our marriages. If there's ever been a trend in our culture that culture would like to buck or change, And that unbelieving people would love for somebody to come up with an answer to is, how do you fall in love and stay in love forever? Everybody wants that. Everybody desires that. And we as believers should be able to model this because we're so aware of the fact that we're not better. We're sinners who've been forgiven sacrificially, unconditionally. And we're learning to extend that forgiveness and that love and that trust to people who we want to spend the rest of our life with. So one of the greatest opportunities we have to impact culture is way beyond just going to church. It's learning to fall in love and stay in love with each other the way our Heavenly Father through Jesus Christ fell in love and stayed in love with us, unconditionally, sacrificially, as Jesus submitted himself for our benefit on the cross when we didn't deserve it. So we've been invited to submit to one another. Our goal is not to make points and win arguments. Our goal is to fall in love or fall in love again and stay in love forever. And as we learn to do that, then maybe God will use us to raise up a generation of people who understand love completely different in a different way as people begin to ask, like, how is it that you've been able to stay in love? How is it that you're so happy? How is it that you've been able to maintain through these difficult times? And we're able to say it's not because we're smart or because we're good. It's because we have a Heavenly Father who has done something incredible for us through his Son and invited us to do the same. And if you're not in love, I hope you fall in love. I hope you fall deep in love. And I hope you stay in love forever. We've got 2 more weeks on this. Let me pray for us. Father, I know for all of us, based on our age or stage of life, our past, our present, this lands in different ways for different people. And for some, it's encouraging. For some, it's a bit painful, and everything in between. But God, you know us better than we know ourselves. And I pray that you would leverage your helper, your Holy Spirit, to help us to know what to do with this. And Father, that you would use it to grow us and mature us, and that you would not only use it to make a difference in us somehow, but that then through us we could make a difference in the lives of other people. And I just pray all this in the name